I hope you can all see the screen. I hope you can all see the screen, yeah?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, so we are going to start looking at ethical theories. We've hinted on them as the time as we've discussed throughout our since the lectures began. So here we hope to cover all three. I hope today will be sufficient and the network will behave itself on that note. So basically, we want to look at the common theories and to discuss these different theories and their criticisms. Like we stated when we began, ethics is not something set in stone. It's not, for example, like the 10 Commandments, which are not a negotiation. There are some. Ethics is it's a little bit fluid. Today, this is the focus this is the theory we can take or the perspective we can take. Tomorrow, this may not be the most applicable. So they have criticisms attached to them, yeah. And we want to see where, in terms of application, where these may be applied or where we may have seen them. So let us first understand theory, what the role of theory is, and how we deal with it. Sorry, my mouse seems to be a little bit erratic. Now, theory starts with, if we are to look at the world, let me first pick a pointer. We look at the world in which we live in, the world that we all know. Sorry, this keeps moving. And we want to understand it, yeah? So theory helps us understand it so that we can know how to change it, okay? Sorry, I don't know why this keeps moving. Let me put it in this mode for this particular slide. So we want to look at the world in which we are living in, and the world in which we are living in, it's looking at this world looks at me as a professional, maybe as a lecturer. Then it looks at how I carry out the context of my teaching or lecturing for that note. Then it looks at also my personality, my personal relationships, either with you, my students, with my colleagues, with my superiors, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So ethics looks at how do we understand, the theory helps us to understand this world and how I can change it, how I interact. For me as a lecturer, as a profession, how do I interact with this world with my profession? How do I carry myself? And so on and so forth. So theory helps us to describe the is. And the ethical theory helps us, sorry, let me get back to look at the owned. Yeah? How do we, how should things be? Then theory then guides me on my action. How should I react? How should I act as a lecturer? So we look at the three core theories that guide ethics. The first is utilitarianism. Sorry. Second is deontology, and then virtue. Sorry, the weather here and the dust is not very helpful. So these are the three major theories that guide ethical thinking: utilitarianism, deontology, and virtue. In summary, we're going to look at each in detail. In summary, utilitarianism looks at consequences. What will be the cost or the benefit if I take this course of action? Yeah. And normally utilitarianism looks for the greatest pleasure for the greatest number of people. Deontology looks at conformity to a moral principle. Who conform? We have this moral principle and we must conform to it. We have a golden rule by which we must all live by and we must conform to it. For me to be ethical is for me to conform to that moral principle, whether it gives me pleasure at the end of it or not. Then virtue, the final one is virtue, where one perfects one's character, okay? And maybe in kindness, being hardworking, and so on and so forth. And each of them have their origins, the people or the individuals, the philosophers who thought these theories up or came up with them, okay? But we're going to look at each of them individually. Now, first, we want to have just some generic talk, just have some discussion for a few minutes, just so that this discussion doesn't remain focused on myself alone. If you could split into groups, yeah, I give you each 5 minutes. And in these 5 minutes, split into groups. We could say, I think there is 17 of us. We could say 3 groups. And then in that time, discuss ethical dilemmas that you have experienced in your personal environment, and then share with us as a whole. So we let us have 5 minutes. Then after 5 minutes discussion, we have a presentation. Yes, Ruth, you have a question or comment?
Yes, please. Thanks, madam. I just wanted to seek clarification on the first part, because you were breaking on what the world established, and I think what we're supposed to do. I didn't get that bit of it.
Sorry. On which one in particular? The group discussion or the previous slides?
The previous slide on the world.
Okay, the previous slides is basically showing us the role theory plays. Sorry, it keeps breaking, it keeps moving. Let me just go back to the slide. It's simply talking about the role of theory in ethics. So we start with the world in which we live. For example, the world in which I live is, as Sheba is, one part of my world is I'm a lecturer. That is my profession. So how do I interact with it? How do I understand this world? What is the objective of me as a lecturer in a university? The different individuals and groups of people that I interact with, the students, my colleagues in the faculty, the university management, and so on and so forth. So theory, first of all, helps me to understand this world, yeah? Or my fellow lecturers to understand this world. And then how do I change it? How do I change the way I interact with this world? The teaching world, the lecturing world. How do I change? First of all, theory helps me to describe, to be descriptive about the world in which I live as a lecturer. What are my responsibilities? What is the expected end game? And then the theory tells me what I ought to do. And therefore leads me to the issue of how do I change it, the action. Okay? Now, that's what theory does. Ruth, so far, are we making sense? Am I clear so far?
Yes, please.
Okay. So essentially, these theories that we have three distinct ethical theories that normally we fall back to, which is utilitarian, deontology, and virtue. Now, the slides that follow, we are going to discuss these in detail, okay? And how each of them can guide an organization or an individual to take a specific course of action, okay? So this particular slide is very, very limited in it's a summarized slide, but we are going to discuss this in detail. So what I've requested of you on this slide is, if we want to understand, I want to understand if ethical dilemmas you may have experienced personally. So I was requesting you, if you can have discussions in your groups I want to give you 5 minutes to formulate and just discuss an ethical dilemma, and just present one of them. Doesn't have to be the entire group individually. Just discuss ethical dilemmas you may have experienced. This could be, you could have maybe maximum 3 groups amongst you, and just have that discussion. Then at the end of the 5 minutes, each group can share, can have maybe 20 minutes to share. Is that okay?
Hey, I don't know how we're going to do it since it's an online class, but let's see. I don't know how the methodology is going to be, like how we're going to do this.
Okay, let me see. What if I try and divide you using Zoom?
Okay.
Okay, I think I can do that. Let me see if I can remember how to create groups. If I stop sharing. Let me break into groups. I'm going to create, should I make 3 or 4? Let me make 4.
Okay. We could get those.
And then I'll say to assign automatically.
someone? Is there someone that wants to start? Hi, Fiona. Fiona, are you there?
Hello.
Okay.
Members, I'm there, but I'm traveling. I'm breaking, so I don't know where you are now.
No, we are nowhere. We are here with you, so you should be joining us in the discussion.
Eh?
So,
Discussion? Hello.
Timothy,
Yes, Nicholas.
you want to start?
Yes, I can share something.
Yes, please.
Am I loud and clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so the question is for us to share our unethical dilemma at our workplace. What I would share is I'm going to give a case scenario. It's not real, but probably to work for this class. So assuming, I've been given an assignment to purchase computers in my department, and there's a budget. I was given a budget. It happens that because of my bargaining skills, I was able to go to the supplier of the computers. And the policy is, if there is any balance that is left, I have to return it to the cashier or whoever is in charge of the procurement. So I go ahead, I procure computers at slightly a cheaper price than expected. So I make a difference, some good money. But of course, I can't. Okay, the thing is, I have to take back the balance. But inside me, I'm like, why would I take back the balance yet I've procured what they wanted? So the dilemma is, should I withhold the balance? Should I take back the balance to the procurement office after I have procured whatever is needed of me? So that's the dilemma I have as an individual. I
Wow.
submit.
Thank you so much, Timothy. It's a very good one, and it's an insightful one. I've seen a similar scenario where a school makes parties, and they choose the person in charge of coordinating the party. That person is given it comes up with a budget and an amount of money that is required. The headmaster does not have to look into what you're going to spend. They want the party done. So for the last couple of years, these people are Tom, Nicholas, and Jen have been handling these parties for the last 3 years. One person has been doing it 1 year, another year, like that. So this time around, a third person called Allen comes in, and she's given the chance to run the planning of the entire party at the school. And at the end of the party, she returns 500,000 to the headmaster. Something the headmaster had not asked for the last 5-10 years of the party being prepared. And this thing got this person promoted because the headmaster says, I have never seen anyone return balance to me after a party. So that it's quite a dilemma whereby you're not given a mandate to return balance. Likewise for your workplace, for that sales thing, whereby nobody knows, but it's actually the organization's money. Though you have made a difference, it's not your difference, but again, they don't know. So it causes a very big dilemma. That's a very good one. Thank you very much. I wanted to give you one though, which was in regard to whistleblowing, whereby something is being done wrong in the organization you're actually working for. It's being done by the people you know and the people you eat with, the people you work with. And you basically want them, but again, what they're doing, you don't want. And then you're left stuck in the middle of whether should I whistleblow, should I report them out, or should I just, let it slide? And then it becomes a big fight in between. So that basically a fight within myself. So that's an example of another ethical dilemma I could think about. And it's very common in places where corruption is not required, and then notice that someone is doing something that would put you all in trouble. But again, he has 5 kids. You cannot, you won't take care of them. But again, what they're doing could throw you in trouble or could, so you're stuck in between. So that's my example. Alan?
Yes. Good evening, members.
Good evening.
Mine is a case where, as a teacher, a student comes to you after you have given exams and you've done marking, and then a student comes to you pleading for more marks. And then the student tells you, Madam, you know what? My parent or whoever is paying for my fees will not accept these marks. With a poor performance, I'm likely not to continue with the school, or maybe the father or whoever is paying may force me to drop out. Teacher, can you please add some marks? Either I'm willing to pay for those marks, I can give you some money, or you add me some extra marks. Next test, you'll chop off those marks. As a teacher, you want the student to continue with his studies. But then when you look at this student's performance, it is not maybe what you want. If it is maybe promotional, there is a possibility that with these marks, the student will even be told to repeat a class. But then a student has come to you pleading and he has told you what may come as a result of this poor performance. So as a teacher, you are like, should I add more marks? And then you look at what they call teachers' code of conduct, and others were like, hey, will I be safe if I say maybe let me add marks, and then I don't consider what they call the teacher's ethics or teacher's code of conduct. So you are in confusion. Should I be
Yeah, welcome back. I was in one of the breakout rooms and I was hearing the discussions, and it was to me it was really interesting. I hope it was ample time. So could we just have one representative to give us from each group? Just give us a summary of some of the ethical dilemmas that you have discussed.
Okay, for us, I think we're in break room 1.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we had discussed about the issue of unrealistic goals set by the companies.
Mm-hmm.
The top management now, like for us in IT, they may set a target of system availability of 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And realistically speaking, throughout even the biggest companies, they can give you maybe 99%,
Mm-hmm.
or at best 99.9. But for them, they keep pushing you to 100%. Now, their goal may be to maybe stabilize systems, or for the customers to have a seamless experience while using the services and products. But to the people, especially the IT people, they are going to undergo undue pressure and stress for every single minute downtime, however may be necessary. It may be for the stabilization of the system, or it may be necessary for the future security of the system. They'll be put through undue stress and pressure just to maintain the goal that the management has thought of.
Yes.
So that was the dilemma we had.
Okay, thank you. That's a good one. Thank you. That's a very good one. Just makes me think of some that I experienced myself. But please let another group also please present.
This is Nicholas. I'll represent a group we had. It had Timothy, Alan, and Jana, and Walter. We discussed 3 actually. Everyone had a chance to give an example. One of them was the actual dilemma of whistleblowing, where you have fellow employees doing something that you feel is not right, but again you can't report them because you know their family.
Mm-hmm.
You won't feed their family. But again, they're doing something that could put you both in trouble or organization at stake. Basically, that connection that comes during work relationships that causes a big dilemma. Should there be a problem? Then also, Tim gave us a very nice one about computer sales and making a difference on purchase by the organization. An organization entrusts you to, go and purchase something like computers. You find a cheap supplier and you make a difference. And then you now feel, yes, can I give them back this money or can I have it? It gives you a bit of a dilemma. I'm summarizing them so that I hurry up. But then there's also this one from Alan, where she's a teacher and a student comes to you and she failed, but she needs more marks because she's asking you to remark her or to give him or her more marks because the sponsor might stop paying for them, if the sponsor stops paying, the student is not going to study again. So the student reaches the point of even asking you to pay you or to ask you to give them more marks in advance so that next exam after they've passed, you can reduce them on the next paper. So basically, they put you in a fixed course of both your ethical code of conduct as a teacher versus your desire to see them remaining in school.
Okay.
Then there's one that Walter gave us about the construction company that he works in, whereby you're sent to supervise works and see people have done their works, the subcontractors, and these people need to be paid. But again, they've not done the work to the fullness. But again, if they're to do it, their costs of repeating the works are very big. So now you become the one man standing between a signature and paying them, and then the bad works, and it gives you a very big dilemma. So basically, that's what I'm having brief.
Thank you so much, Nicholas and Tim. Thank you for that good discussion. Next group.
Hello, this is Saida.
Yes, Saida.
Representing room 4. So we talked about one dilemma, which is relating to enforcing policies at work. For example, we know IT is one of the enforcers of not using office hours for personal things. For example, restricting the use of, let's say, YouTube during working hours. And then here you are seated next to your workmate who is supposed to enforce, but he removed his computer from that restriction. So you ask yourself, okay, the enforcer is actually not enforcing. Do I report him? What do I do? So we try to dissect this based off the theories. We try to remember them because the slide went off very fast. So the first one was the utilitarian, I think. So that we looked at the cost benefit. So I would ask myself as a person, so how do I benefit from not reporting this person? Should we strike a deal and for every hour that he uses, maybe YouTube, he pays me? Or can I look at the company and look at how it's going to cost the company? Do I use cost benefit in a selfish way? Then we looked at the second one, which starts with D. That word is a bit hard to pronounce, but that second theory we looked at maybe following the rules and regulations. They are very clear. So I would look at the rules and regulations and then enforce them probably by reporting him. Then the third one that looks at my character. So as a person, like from my character, maybe from my, if I use the care ethics lens, like I would maybe, as Nicholas said, I know this person, I know their family, I know how this is going to affect them. So should I use that as a way to guide me on the decision to make based off this dilemma? So that was our discussion in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saida. The next group, so far we have 3 that have talked. So I think the fourth. We have the last group, please.
Yes. So we're the last group, and I think all of our submissions lay on the boundary of information security compliance, the leadership of like the IT managers in some of the institutions. So I will speak for my own example, then I'll pass on to the next person's example so that I don't like miss their scenarios. So for me, where I was working, one time I was IT manager and I had like targets to hit. I had a lot of workload. So by the time it clocks 5 p.m., I still have like things to finish before I close that day. But because my information security policy tells me that I'm not supposed to carry a work device home, but then also I'm torn between like I need to deliver this today, but then it's time up. So one time I get to like just carry the device home and I got robbed. And this information, critical company information, got into wrong hands. So I get on the crossroads, like should like could I have like abide by the policy, or still maybe I could have just left it and rolled it over to the next day. So that was my dilemma, and I will pass it to the next person to speak theirs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Apollo.
Yes,
Hello,
Evelyn.
thank you, Apollo. Yes, this is Evelyn. My ethical dilemma, as I discussed in the group with my colleagues, has just happened within this past week, actually within this week. My laptop Microsoft Office package has been expired, so I tried to purchase. And it has delayed. and I've been in a tight. I had to make I'm preparing some presentation that I'm going to use next week, and it's the same laptop that I have to use for the presentation. So I had to make a decision which is not so ethical. It's not professional. So I had to bypass and use a pirated one to help me out for next week, because I don't know when I'll get the response or by the order that I've made, because it delayed. So I've used the shortcut of using a pirated one. That's my ethical dilemma that I was in. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Evelyn. Do we have any other?
Good evening, members.
Good
This is
evening,
Amina. Mine is not so different from Evelyn. It is still about pirated software. Currently, there is a program I was executing, and it required me to use Windows operating system. Though I'm not a fan, but the program had to compel me to use Windows operating system. So when I installed the system, it required me to use the packages as well. But the operating system I installed it on a virtual machine, and I had to install the packages. I maneuvered to use the operating system, but time came when I could no longer use the Microsoft packages. It kept on demanding for the key. So I had to go to the IT support, people who are responsible for those keys, to help me with the software, which is not pirated, and the key, so that I can continue using those packages. But it was quite unfortunate. They just directed me to a particular site whereby I can use a pirated software, of which after some times it started asking for the keys. I couldn't provide the keys, and I had to forego the usage of the software of the Microsoft packages. So what I did, I had to move back and forth. I use Windows concurrently with the Linux. Because Linux is an open source, I had to use the packages for Linux and then upload the files on my Google Drive. I download them from the virtual machine and then execute the content I needed to work on. So in that regard, I was compelled to use the pirated software for me to be able to execute the program I needed to work on.
Okay.
So that is my submission.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amina. Do we have anyone else?
Good evening, doctor.
Good evening, Fifi.
I'm sorry, I'm traveling. That's why I'm on and off.
No, it's
We
okay. It's
also have a
understandable.
scenario.
Yes, please.
We had a scenario last month. Actually, it is still a case at our place where some staffs manipulated into the system and tried to change, actually the accounting officers, and tried to change some figures on the money which was indicated for the project. You see, in local government, there is what we call vote controllers. We have different departments, so which we call offices, and those departments have heads. So those heads are the ones we call vote controllers. So we had a certain project. They did all the procedures of the project, and the money was allocated there. It was actually passed. So when it went on someone's account, it seems that person used that money to do, or I don't know whether her personal things, or I don't know how he did the thing. So at the end of the day, the boss came and said that the project was supposed to start on this and this date. Where is the money? And I remember we allocated this money, and it was when we check on the system, the thing is already initiated somewhere. Where did the money go? So that those officers, They are now stranded with the case. We don't know what to do, but it's really a problem to our side. We have a case now to answer. So there is that scenario of accounting manipulating in a system and try to change some figures.
Thank you so much, Fifi, for that contribution. Do we have any other contribution? If no, I think one of the things this exercise has shown is that ethical dilemmas are part and parcel of our work environment. It may be IT related, it might be personal related draft. I think examples have been on whistleblowing. You may identify something that is happening, but you're saying, I know this person, I know their family. I know them so well. I know the husband, I know the children. If I say something, this is a lost job and so on and so forth. Then maybe you know the person, you know their good side, and you know things like that. So we see that we experience ethical dilemmas. So it's not something foreign to us as professionals. And hopefully we see that this module is going to be extremely helpful for us in these points of ethical dilemmas. So with that, thank you everyone for your contributions. We want to look at just some things. I hope my mouse will behave. Again, to go back to what we had discussed previously, what business ethics is, it's about helping us make those decisions, giving us a methodology on how to make these different decisions that we make. Here is a scenario, okay? First scenario, we have 3 scenarios ahead of us. First scenario, you have a trolley that is moving along this railway track, and this trolley, there's somebody controlling, somebody controlling the movement of this trolley. On one side, he sees that if the trolley continues straight ahead, there will be probably 5 people that will be crushed. And then there's an alternative route which will only crush 1 person. Now, of course, this is an extreme case. We would rather say, why don't you just stop the trolley altogether, that no life is lost? That would be maybe the question someone would be asked, why don't you just stop the trolley once and for all? But then another person will say, what if stopping this trolley is impossible or detrimental? So I make the choice of 1 person dying instead of the 5, okay? So there are different scenarios here where someone would be asked the different questions. Here's another one where the trolley is coming straight ahead and they are observers, okay? They are observers. These observers can maybe shout to the trolley to stop, or maybe why don't you come and stop and help these people who are tied to the rails. This reminds me of a practical situation that happened several years back. This was several years back when there were heavy droughts experienced by, I can't remember clearly, either it was Somalia, I think it was Somalia, not Ethiopia, because of the war that was going on. And there was a picture that came that circulated. That time social media wasn't very active. It was several years back. I think when I had just started working. That is when the 2000, early 2000s. So there was a picture that circulated of a child who was, I think, moving with the parents towards one of the camps where they could receive food. And this child was so malnourished and was at the point of death. And at a certain point, the child there was a picture taken. This child was collapsing, and there was, these vultures, these vultures that feed on dead bodies. It was there looking at the child, waiting for the child to die so that he could start feeding. And then a question was raised. The person who took this picture, They were busy taking a picture instead of coming to rescue this child. There was the ethical question there, that really was the best thing this person could do, take a picture. Couldn't he or she have done better and gone and picked this child and taken this child where there was food, instead of taking this picture whereas it sensationalized the famine? Yes, but there was the ethical question of, there was this one individual you could have saved. So this is what, for me, this picture brings to mind. Then we have a third one here of a transplant surgeon. Now, some of you may know what these transplant surgeons do. This picture reminds me of, there's a series I like to watch called SVM. I forget. It's basically a show about a particular police department in New York, which handles special victims, specifically victims of rape or child abuse or things like that. There was this one particular scenario where there was a young girl who unfortunately was pranked by her friends as a what would be a primary school girl in Uganda. She was pranked by her friends. She fell, got heavy brain damage, and unfortunately died. Now, when the parents wanted to, the mother specifically wanted to pick a ring the child was wearing, and then she noticed that the child's chest had been opened, was sewed up, meaning that body parts, her organs had been harvested without the parents' consent. And then an ethical dilemma came up, because the surgeon who did it was harvesting body parts from children, but however was sending them to children who were in need. So at the time when the police realized the heart was just going to be transported to a child who needed it, and the policewoman had to stop this heart from being taken. And actually later on, they brought the little boy who needed the heart, and he explained his case. And later on, that child died, actually, because the child didn't receive a heart as was expected. So there is that ethical dilemma. You have this surgeon who is taking maybe body parts without the explicit permission of the patient or the parents of the patient, and is although saving a life, but has taken a body part without permission. So those are also ethical dilemmas. So I don't want to talk about consequentialism in detail, but I just want to talk about just some of the things that, because we're going to go into detail into consequentialism or utilitarianism and deontology. But I just want to talk about some things that cause, apart from theory, that are a real dilemma to ethics, the ethical theories. One of them is relativism. I don't know how many of you have heard about relativism. For me, myself, in my Catholic faith, I've had this being discussed a lot. This thing of saying what I feel, if I feel this is right, then it should be right. If I feel it is wrong, then it should be wrong. This is where we look to subjectivism. It depends on me. And you've had things now being said, words being said like my truth. Nothing like truth with a capital T. Truth means that whether I like it or not, it is the truth. Let me give you an example. Gravity is a truth. Whether I like it or I don't, gravity exists. If I get up and say, I don't believe in gravity, I don't think it exists, if I decide to jump off a roof, gravity will act. Okay? Gravity will take its course. That is a truth that goes beyond. So unfortunately, in our current world, this relativism exists, and it affects ethical decision making. So that is one. Okay, let's move to the next. Sorry. So these are just some criticisms of relativism, basically summarized, but to what the example I've just given. There's also cultural relativism. Cultures differ, okay? Our culture, cultural norms and customs differ. I remember I watched a friend of mine, there's a friend of mine at the university who loves these Kadongo Kamu songs. And I remember there was one Kadongo Kamu song where there was a man who brought a wife from a different tribe. And after they gave birth, they told him that, you know, you're supposed to eat your firstborn. You know, of course, that's an extreme case, but basically it is just giving a demonstration that cultural customs and norms differ. And in some cases where certain things are seen as laws in a certain custom, they are actually against human rights. I'll give you an example. In Pakistan, there is a law called the blasphemy law, which is highly favorable to Muslims and can very easily bring trouble for Christians. There was a case of a Christian woman in Pakistan. But Christian communities are very, very rare. And this lady had been talking with her fellow women, and they accused her of uttering some blasphemous words, which she says she didn't. So of course it became a he said, she said situation. And this woman, I think, had been sentenced to death, but I think because of international pressure, the situation was overturned. So the problem with cultural customs and norms, they tend to be biased in a sense. Now, secondly, the other thing that also we must take note of is the issue of following laws. One, something being legal does not make it moral. Okay? Something being legal does not make it moral. I remember I was talking to a lawyer consulting about a certain legal matter. And then the lawyer said something interesting. He said something, there is the law and then there is the truth. Those are not the same thing. Okay? So also following something in a law-like manner does not necessarily make it morally right. So those are just some of the things I wanted to highlight before discussing the ethical theories. Now, briefly also, to bring us a little bit back to what we discussed previously on moral development and maturity. Yeah. Before I go further, Tom has raised his hand. Tom, you have a question or comment?
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, please.
I remember one of our colleagues was presenting an ethical dilemma, and to me it looked like a breach of law. And then I've also talked about it again, where you said something being legal doesn't make it the truth, or doesn't make it morally right.
Yes.
But is the reverse true? Like in most cases, when something is right, it is also legally, like it's also legal. Something right, it's automatically legally right as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think, Tom, you raise also a very good question, that something may be moral, but may not be legal. So again, it's the same thing. Like we said, when we're studying ethics, one of the things we must understand is we're not looking at the 10 commandments. Yeah, we're looking at things that change, positions change. I gave you the example of that series that I watched where there was a doctor who harvested organs from a dead child for the right reason, but legally she was wrong. Yeah, legally, she was wrong. And I remember at a certain point, she said, if I ask a parent in a time when they have just lost their child, what are the chances this parent will say yes? Okay? What are the chances this parent will say yes? But then also on the other side, also on the other moral side, as much as she wanted to save lives, death is part and parcel of us, whether it be the death of a child or an adult. However, of course, when it is a child, everyone would like to see something being done as human beings as we may be. But ethical dilemmas, Tom again want to say, is they are not set in stone. Ultimately, you're trying to make the best possible decision. Okay, the best possible decision. So that's why there's no size that fits all. Okay, so just coming back to our discussion here, again, when we look at our levels of maturity, our ethical decisions will change depending on our levels of maturity, where we have reached a point of reason. We had discussed about this previously in the lecture before. The other thing that also may cause some ethical dilemma is the question of ethical egos. And what is our own rational interest? Yeah. If here you have an image of a ring, I don't know how many of you have ever watched the movie Lord of the Rings. I don't know how many of you have watched it. It's a it's a movie that is heavily theological. It's about a ring. It's a mythical. It's basically literature itself. It's literature in its fullest sense. It's full of symbolism. And in this particular movie, there is a young hobbit, basically these small people, who comes across a ring which his uncle had. And this ring, he realizes when he puts it on, he becomes invincible. And it kind of begins to suck the life out of him. And he's given a task of taking it to a particular point where it's going to be destroyed. And in this, you see later on that this ring represents in two things. It can represent something you desire so much, or in other terms, in other theological terms, it can represent what we refer to as sin. Okay, so that you see that when someone puts it on, the person disappears. That's how we feel when we are in a situation where we are pleasing ourselves. When I'm focused on me and my self-interest as me. So this particular ring, later on we notice there are particular characters in the story, those who have been consumed, that they lose themselves. They show you the person before and after when they have been consumed by the ring. So that is essentially humanity at its best. We are selfish and we tend to think of myself, okay? You've heard from the different ethical dilemmas. I think there was one which was interesting where he said, if I've seen my colleague who's supposed to be a controller is busy watching YouTube, for me not to whistle blow, why don't I ask him for something so that I don't report him? That is a very, I think it's one of the best, I think, analogies or dilemmas that I've seen. Where I think of me, why don't he's thinking about himself? Why don't I think of me? Why doesn't he give me a card? Or the situation where I am buying computers and I see I can make some jaulo. Selfishness, it's self-interest. That is our very nature, the ethical egoism. where I may decide to choose something based on my rational self-interest. Okay? Let me give you an example. If I'm making Injaulo, let's say I have school fees to pay. Okay? I have school fees to pay. I don't have the money. I don't see it coming from anywhere. I might say ethically, I have to pay school fees. It is a duty. So me skimming off here something may not be so wrong. So those are some, I just wanted to highlight some things that affect ethical decision making and affect our ethical theories. Now let us start with these theories one by one. First one, utilitarianism, or sometimes referred to as consequentialism, where we think about the end result. Okay? One of the founders of utilitarianism, Betham, says that an act is considered morally right if agent A at a particular time T has to act in order to maximize the total amount of good. So utilitarianism basically says, if at this particular point in time, if I carry out action A, and it ends up bringing good for so many people. So for example, if I decide to skim off some company resources as I'm buying computers, I buy the computers, but I end up making Jalo and pay school fees. So the company is happy, it has received its computers, and I have skimmed off some money and paid school fees for my children. Therefore, action A should be morally right. Okay? That is essentially utilitarianism, seeking the greatest good for the greatest number. Utilitarianism also sometimes referred to as hedonistic utilitarianism, seeking for the greatest pleasure. Okay? Seeking for the greatest pleasure. If there is, what is pleasure? What is considered good is pleasure. Pleasure is the absence of pain. Okay? It is seen as the absence of pain. And that's what we are seeking for. So Betham argues that one, utilitarianism is good because one, it treats everyone in the same way. We are saying pleasure is the same for all of us. Okay? It is realistic because it is based on real psychology. We are all seeking for happiness. We're all seeking for pleasure. We're all seeking for good consequences. Although there are those who may argue about it. It is non-metaphysical. It doesn't make goodness / badness or right, wrongness some sort of weird quality. Eh? It's a natural right. It's a natural right. It is non-elitist. That means that we are all seeking for the same thing. We are not saying it is for only a specific class of people, and so on and so forth. In principle, you can use a calculator which gives you an actual answer. What should I do in this case? Okay? So for each action, the calculation is this. You have intensity times duration, and then determine probability. So you can calculate a total result by saying intensity times duration times probability, and then you get the ultimate result of what action should I take. If you have several actions that you are taking, you're making a decision from. Here are some questions. What counts as pleasure? Okay, and here are some where the ethical dilemmas begin to come out. Let us say my pleasure, I seek pleasure from beating up people. That is my pleasure. That is my pleasure. I gave you an example in one of the previous lecture about a gentleman in Germany who said he wanted to eat a human being. That was his pleasure. Okay? So what counts as pleasure? So Betham says it's the source of pleasure doesn't matter. If it is to feel pain that gives me pleasure, gives the majority of us pleasure, let's go ahead. So you already see the ethical dilemmas that come out of it, that are coming out of utilitarianism. We can also see, are all goods consumable? If someone decides, I want to eat a worm, or someone says, I want to eat a stone, or I want to feel pain, or I want to cause others pain, okay? So those are the ethical dilemmas. Now, in terms of business, we already see utilitarianism coming in, and especially for ICT. I want to bring this out for ICT. Look at the example of social media, smartphones, okay? They are on the market because they give us pleasure. When I am on TikTok, the pleasure I receive, I can very easily right now, for example, be talking to you, but at the same time, I'm on social media. So essentially, I'm not giving you 100% of my time to you. So ICT itself is specifically designed around utilitarianism, the free market. We want to maximize profit by giving out goods or services that appeal to the majority. Okay? This is essentially how utilitarianism works. Some criticisms, we have already seen some of them. People do not always make decisions based on pleasure. Case in point, somebody suffering from kidney failure. I have a friend whose father suffered from kidney failure for 4 years before he passed on. And I remember she would tell me the things he had to give up, the different foods he had to give up. He couldn't eat salt anymore. He loved pork, he couldn't eat pork anymore. He loved his bottle of beer, he couldn't drink it anymore. If he had to eat chicken, for example, chicken was the only thing he could eat, but because he couldn't eat salt, it had to be marinated with vinegar. So you can imagine the complete change. Most of us eat food out of pleasure. But when you have a health sickness, when you have a health condition, you have to essentially change your diet, okay? We cannot reduce human beings to something quantifiable units, to aggregations, where we say, if this is the greatest pleasure for the greatest number of people, then therefore we should neglect the smaller percentage, the lower percentage. Let me just give you an example, especially in the Western world where we have highly developed societies. You have, let's say, you have a building constructed where it must give access to everyone, the disabled, those with certain whatever condition, and so on and so forth. You have classrooms which must accommodate everyone, not just those who can hear and speak and see properly. Okay, so you can't reduce human beings to something quantifiable. Yeah, it is not possible to have a limitless view to what the consequences that are in the future. If we make a decision based on consequences alone, for example, the example which I gave of making in Njaulo, I've bought computers for the company, I've managed to pay school fees. What if that constant eroding of profits which could have gone back eventually causes bankruptcy? What if I keep wanting more and more on the Njaulo and eventually cause bankruptcy to the organization? What happens? It's not possible to see further into the future because consequences also continue. What if my children see me taking this in jail and also take it a notch further? Okay, so utilitarianism is actually, in some cases, for example, I'm not saying it is completely wash it aside. No, it has made good money. We now have smartphones which have been designed for purposes of pleasure, but also at the same time, they have also been very useful Yes, they've helped the smartphone makers are making profit, and they've had and in actual sense, for most of us in ICT, when we produce any kind of artifact, when we're measuring adoption, we're looking for how much pleasure does it give the user. Okay, that determines adoption. So utilitarianism cannot be thrown aside. Democracy itself is based on utilitarianism. The candidate that comes out is normally the one that pleases the majority. So we cannot say it is something that we can push aside. Let me also just give you another example. Let us say I requested all of you, we need to, for example, me as a lecturer, I have a barrier tomorrow. I've requested that, can we move the lecture to Friday? Okay, let's move the lecture to Friday so that I can attend the lecture. I have moved the lecture for the many for the sake of a barrier. That is not utilitarianism in actual sense. But however, we could have that one was a case of virtue. Let us say there's a case of barrier to go and stand with a colleague, and good enough you accepted. But what if it was another situation where it is not about barrier, it's about convenience for me, the lecturer? I don't feel like lecturing on Saturday. Should I inconvenience the many for the sake of the one? Would that be right? If I'm just not comfortable teaching on Saturday, it's my day off, I would like to do work on my hair, my nails, and so on and so forth. Would it be ethically right for me to inconvenience the many for the sake of the one? So in that case, utilitarian would have come in very well said, no, in actual sense, what you're seeking for is of less academic value than for the many. Maybe for the many, there's another lecture, you have a heavy schedule, and all of us must be fit in there somewhere. So the many must come in. So utilitarian comes in. So the criticism is not to say that utilitarianism is null and void. No, it has its good points. It has its times when it should be applied and when it should not be applied. And specifically when we look at some of these things, the criticisms, when we think about just numbers, the many, well, the few also have a good point to drive across, and their thoughts must be heard. When we think that human beings should only make decisions based on pleasure, what about the sick? Okay, and many times also, like myself, I may not be in the same category as somebody with kidney failure, but at my age, I must think now I cannot think, oh, I must drink soda every minute of my life. At my age, I must consider what I consume. I cannot eat certain foods because my digestive system cannot handle them. As much as I like them, my digestive system is a bit on the middle age side. I cannot really handle certain things. So I cannot eat certain things simply out of pleasure. So then again, in terms of consequences, yeah. Then there's the issue of intention. The intention matters, yeah. The intention of why we are doing something can determine the moral status, and this is where deontology comes in. We are going to get to that. There are different types of utilitarianism. We have rule utilitarianism. So this is where you act according to the rule that will produce the most utility. Yeah, act versus utilitarianism. Then there's preference utilitarianism, where you act so as to maximize the greatest preference. Yeah. So even here, when we're designing artifacts or things like for ICT artifacts, we normally say, what is the greatest preference? What do the majority want? One way to think of a right is a trump against the claims of general welfare. A right if you have a right not to be killed, then you have a right not to kill someone. And you have a duty not to kill. If I don't want to be killed, then I should not kill someone else. Those are some things that basically come up against utilitarianism. If I have a right not to be killed, do I also have a right over my property? Do I have a right over stolen goods? If I say I have a right not to be killed, then I also do not have a right to steal property that doesn't belong to me. For example, a case of injauro, making injauro over others. And so the issue of right, when we think about rights, then deontology comes in. Because deontology looks at the right or the duty of the individual. That becomes the moral superiority, that the superiority, that the motive that drives decisions that we make. I may have an inclination to do something, but because it is my duty. For example, I may have a right, I may have an inclination to drink a lot of alcohol, but I also have a duty to my health. Okay? A sense of duty to my health. I may have an inclination to taking injaulo from my company, but I also I should have a sense of duty towards funds that don't belong to me, that are collective, or maybe not collectively owned, but are owned by the organization. These funds don't belong to me, they are for the organization. The sense of duty, the autonomous sense of duty. Unlike utilitarianism, where you seek for the end result, here for the motive matters, the sense of duty matters. So here the reason comes in. The use of reason comes in when we make a decision. It is not necessarily how I feel about something, but the ability to reason. If I don't want this thing done to me, I shouldn't do it to the other. So the sense of rationality comes into play. It informs our moral decision making. I'm supposed to do good, avoid evil. That's the basic moral principle that drives deontology. So let me see if I've missed something more. Never treat a person merely as a means to an end, but always treat them as an end and an end to themselves. So if the golden rule of do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So that is the second formation. The first formation is only act only according to that maxim that you can, at the same time will that it should become a universal law, a rule that applies to everybody, not just for the few, but for everybody. So you first have that rule that applies to everybody, and then you have the second one, which says never treat a person merely as a means to an end, but treat them as an end in themselves. So the person is the end result. The good of the person is the end result. So step one formulates a sincere and rational maxim, which is not based on pleasure, but what, for example, if I want life, we say everyone has a right to life. Every single human being has a right to life. Whether this person is the same tribe as you, whether they're the same gender as you, whether they believe they have the same belief as you, they have a right to life. Just every single human being has a right to life. Therefore, if I encounter somebody who is different from me, who is doing something different from me, they have that right to life. Even if their life infringes on mine. Take an example. If I find myself pregnant with a child who is that pregnancy is a result of rape, as much as it is distressful for me as a person to have this child, it is also not right for me to take the life of this child, because the child has a right to life just like I do. Okay? So that is where that maxim comes in, the rational maxim. So the second one is to universalize it, that it is for everyone, even if that person's life, like the example of the child who is causing me emotional distress, I must recognize the right to life of that child. Step 3, imagine a world that would result from conjoining all the laws of physics. Yeah? Test the maxim. Is there any contradiction? Yeah, is there any contradiction? Now take the example, let me take the further example of a child in the womb. What if I have a child in the womb that is causing me to die? As long as this child is in my womb, the child is causing me to die. But we've also just said that the child has the right to life just like I do. What should then be done? How can we achieve the means of the action you proposed in 1? The right to life. The child in my womb is causing me to die. As long as this child exists, the life continues to go on in the womb, there's also a likelihood I will lose my life. Okay? Could I consistently will that this social world actually exists? Then there is the action of, should I abort the child? There are some situations, some countries where they say abort the child because it's causing the life of the mother. There are situations where they create a gray area. Take an example for women. Women may know a situation called ectopic pregnancy. I don't know if I pronounce it well. This is where I think the fetus or the fertilized egg is in the fallopian tube of the mother, and in that case, as the child continues to grow, it will cause the tube to burst and therefore eventually cause the mother to die. So normally what happens medically, they will operate the mother. Once it is known, they'll operate and with the intention of removing the fertilized egg, which will kill the child, but it is not, normally what the medics say, it is not the intention to kill the child, but in the act of removing the fertilized egg, that baby will die. Okay? So that becomes kind of a gray area of explaining what has been done there. So some criticisms of deontology. It's absolutist and inflexible. And for sure, you can see that in situations it can be quite, especially if there are very high negative consequences, it can be inflexible. So then there are maxims which seem to be okay, but fail the C1 test. I gave you that example of abortion. We have no positive formula for constructing maxims. That is the golden rule. We have no positive formula for constructing those. So there may be laws which may be formulated that may actually be unjust. There are just some principles that deontology follows. We ought to act in ways that do not cause needless harm or injury to others. Okay, so that should be, those are just some guiding principles that deontology offers. We shouldn't seek to cause harm to anyone or injury to another. So just to give you the example of the ectopic pregnancy, where the intention is not to kill the baby, but of course the act of removing the baby from the fallopian tube will automatically harm the baby. The principle of beneficence. This is where you act in ways where we promote the welfare of everyone, of every single person. The principle of utility. We should act in a way that will bring the greatest benefit and the least harm. Whereas utilitarianism is simply looking at pleasure, that pleasure may actually cause harm for another person. Okay? May actually cause harm for another person. So that is deontology. Let's look at virtue. Virtue essentially looks at good character. What kind of person should I be? What kind of person I ought to be? Okay? It recommends that you become the kind of person that you want, that will do what is right instinctively. Yeah? Instinctively, you'll do what is right and just. How do I become virtuous? And you notice here we have 3 images that represent some kind of religion. Okay? We have Jesus Christ in one, we have Buddha, and this is very much a science thing. You could have also the situation of Islam, something like that. It's also, it can be put in the same category as Christianity and Buddha and Buddhism. Religion helps us to become virtuous individuals, human beings, especially when we embrace our religions. That experience, reflection, and things like that, they really help us to become virtuous individuals, human beings. So virtue is one. Second is habits, instincts. Because of virtue, virtue helps us to create habits. Yeah. So they become, those habits become moral exemplars. Things that someone can point out and say, this one has a habit of, for example, prayer, or this one has a habit of listening. Yeah. Virtue probably taught this person to listen to the other, understand the other, to be kind. So virtue ethics looks at 2 things, moral virtues and then practical or non-moral virtues. So moral virtues, we're looking at things like compassion, developing virtues of honesty, charity, sincerity, sympathy, so on and so forth. Let's first of all understand that whether you are a religious person or not, you can pick up these habits. Okay? In Christian thinking, in Christian virtue, in Christianity, and so on and so forth. I remember there was a recent statement made by Pope Francis where he said, all human beings are essentially good. And there was an uproar saying, no, that is not possible. But in actual sense, he was right. Okay? In actual sense, he was very right. All human beings do have a sense of right and wrong, and do have a tendency to lean towards goodness. There is goodness in every single human being. Let me just give you an example. Even if you go to a thief, someone is stealing for the sake of themselves, that I may have food, that I may go treat myself when I'm sick, let me go for healthcare. Essentially, that is willing good for myself, even though my habit of stealing is causing harm to another person. Okay? Now, of course, for those who are looking at religion, you might say, then what's the point of religion? Point of religion is to seek holiness. There's a difference between that virtue, holiness, and goodness. The point that normally a religious person will tell you the point of life is not to be good, it is to be holy. So that's the point. That's where religion it differs from ethics. Okay? Ethics being ethical does not mean that I am holy. And to be holy is to demonstrate superhuman virtue. Okay, and anyone, if you look at the different, I think every religion has somebody that they look up to, and when they look at them, they see something of sainthood, holiness in that individual. So that is where we must understand things like honesty. Someone will demonstrate honesty maybe to his or her wife, but may not demonstrate honesty to their boss. You may demonstrate honesty, to your spouse, not to his or her wife, sorry. You may demonstrate honesty to your spouse, but not demonstrate it to your workplace. That is a different thing. Loyalty, fairness, and so on and so forth. Then we have the non-practical virtues. Rationality, intelligence, tenacity, capability, patience, and so on and so forth. Now, one might say, is intelligence a virtue? Yes, it is a virtue. Look at look at what you're doing now, each one of you now. You're seeking to increase your knowledge for the sake of, for yourself, to get a better job or to get a promotion at work, and also for the sake of your workplace, that they may have a better skill available to the organization. It's a practical non-moral virtue, and it's necessary, okay? To increase a greater level of rationality, that I can reason a little bit better than I did when I was 5 years old, is a virtue. There are people who actually fail to increase in rationality. I don't know. I remember there are people. I'm not saying that education is the key for everything. Please don't quote me wrong there. No, there are people who are very good with non-academic intelligence, who you find that those people who are really good at business, or common sense and things like that, without ever going into a classroom. So don't get me wrong there. But there are situations. I don't know if you've met certain individuals who fail to move further in school and simply stay at a certain level of thinking. Yeah, I remember just remember a particular case of a classmate of mine. He was my classmate in primary. He didn't go further, and I met him again when I was in S4, and his conversation was still at P7 level. Okay, P7 level, because he didn't go further than that. So that was where rationality didn't move further than it should. Some criticisms of virtue ethics. We have different cultural groups, okay? So therefore, virtue ethics cannot be universal because it leads to undesirable cultural relativism. Virtue ethics cannot be made universal. For example, what is good for a Christian may not be seen as good for a Muslim. Or what is good for Buddha or a Buddhist cannot be necessarily transplanted to Christianity. There are some commonalities. There are definitely some commonalities that we can find. I remember one time I was listening to a monk, a Catholic monk, and he said that one time he had visited one of these countries where Buddhism is very strong. I don't know if it was Tibet or something like that. And he said as he was walking, he found a Buddhist monk who looked at him and came and touched his chest. And he said, in that moment, we realized the similarity amongst ourselves. Both of us are monks. Both of us are following, should I say, the same theological virtues of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And although they are of completely different faiths, but there are definitely commonalities. But you cannot transplant one virtue into another situation. It's not possible. You'll find, for example, in Christianity, let me just give you an example. For Christianity, maybe abortion may be a complete no-no. For another person in science, for example, it doesn't hold the same virtue, because in science one may say that the life of the person we can see is more important than the one we can't see. So you find that you cannot transplant, or you cannot, it cannot hold the same weight. Now, virtue may be praiseworthy, but in terms of practicality, sometimes in some practical cases, it may not be applicable. So let me just go back to the subject of abortion. How does a hospital, for example, handle the situation of a person who has been raped, a young lady who has been raped, and there's a possibility of pregnancy? If Christianity says do not destroy any life whatsoever, Christianity, Islam, these groups of religions say do not destroy life at any point. How does a hospital handle, or any organization handle, a rape situation, where you may need a blanket law on how do the medics handle, where virtue may handle something else, the virtue of let me respect a life. So virtue ethics may not be practical in certain situations. So those are the three ethical theories. I don't know if we have any questions. Any question or comment? I've seen Nicholas is saying, so is there preventative arrest on ethical action? Preventive arrest. Nicholas, could you elaborate on the question?
Just asked, you were giving an example, and I thought about these people who are arrested and police comes out to say it is preventive. They're arresting you because you might make a mistake, and they put you in a house or a prison or something.
Yes.
Deterring you from doing something the other. So
is it ethical? I think by the time a crime has to be committed, a crime must be committed before. There are situations, for example, where I hear people who are on suicide watch, in case you may commit suicide. We are trying to prevent you from commit suicide, but I don't think you are necessarily arrested. You may be committed in an institution just to prevent you from harming yourself. That is one. But I don't think there's a situation where you can be arrested in the event that they are worried you may commit some kind of crime. I think all arrests are done after a crime has been committed.
Yeah, well, this is common in Uganda, but it has been done before, and I think you've heard of house arrests, preventive arrests.
Okay, house arrests. Eh?
Yeah, it's a preventive arrest.
Are those political or?
They can be political. Now you brought in the essence of someone that they think might kill themselves, or they deem them unhealthy. Okay, of course, in politics there are so many things that you mentioned. The ethical lens is lenses. And one of them can dispute something, and another will justify it. So, so politics is a bit of a different thing. I was just trying to pick your mind on that entire thing, preventive arrest. When someone says they assume you might do something wrong.
Yes,
so, and
therefore they do. Well, I think for politics creates a lot of ethical dilemmas. I think one, and also two, and of course presents a lot of cases of human rights. Well, there's human rights abuse, and that's a simple and stated fact. Eh? And I don't think we can put it any other way. There are human rights abuses, and someone I don't think should be arrested. I think it should be a law, But at the same time, I think, Nicholas, it goes back to our earlier statement where we said a law is not necessarily morally right. So laws are, one of the things we understand, laws are created by human beings, and human beings have motives. Okay, so as much as a law is being seen as being objective, in reality, a law is created by human beings who have motives, and the motives may be right, they may be wrong, they may be misguided, whatever the case. Whatever the case, yeah. So in a situation where someone is arrested believing they may do something, that may be just simply put, a human rights abuse.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to also understand that, pick your mind on the two things. Number one, we talk about ethical theories and then ethical lenses. Are we talking about the same thing?
Ethical theories and then ethical
lenses?
Yes, they are the same thing. Basically, on how do we look, what view do we take, and also just to clarify, as an individual, an organization, you're not supposed to say it's not an obligation to say we are picking this lens and we can't pick any other lens. No, situations differ. We talked about utilitarianism. If we're talking about democracy and right and voting and so on and so forth, utilitarianism is perfectly okay. If we are talking about a life or death situation, utilitarianism is not the best situation. If we're choosing between a life of one person over the other, utilitarianism cannot be the option that we pick. Something like that. Maybe virtue, ethics, or deontology may come into play. Deontology, on the other hand, being inflexible, may not be the best thing to look at when we're looking at, for example, the situation of a heart transplant situation. Okay, it may not be the best thing that we consider. Situation. So situations differ, and we must use different lenses for different cases. So ethics is not set in stone like the 10 Commandments. So that's the first and most important thing that I would like to drive across. You mustn't feel that, you see now, me, I'm a person of religion, I should automatically take virtue ethics. No. Yeah. Take an example. If you have a policy in your workplace, then a policy which dictates on when social media should be used, then deontology may come into play. Okay, if it is a question of whistleblowing, virtue ethics may come in to guide you. So it's the different lenses come into play in different times. Do you have any question? Any other comment? Yes, Nicholas?
Well, I feel like at some point ethics and ethics feels like I don't want to call it a game. It feels like what favors me at some point, or what favors some people, should be deemed good. So
Yes.
I had that scenario that I can feel free to share with you here.
Yes, please.
Well, most of us here are parents and we pay school fees. But I wanted us to discuss, and you see, when you're paying school fees, it's not that you have all the money at once and you need to pay for it. So I faced a challenge whereby I paid for one of my children, and then the money bounced back to my account, and yet I got a payment receipt.
Okay.
I got a receipt that I have paid, but the money bounced back to my account. And now there is another child who I also need to pay for, and pay for them, and the money goes. and it's time for school. When you go to school, and you're only asked to present a what? A receipt of payment, an receipt. And if you present it, they will not bother your child until they go to the physical check of
Yes.
was it ever reflected. And again, I'm not doing that because I want to cheat the school, because I'm not going to run away I'm not going to run away after 1 year or after one term. But it has given me a chance not to explain to the school. But guys, basically it gave me a leeway to go minus pay sometimes.
Yes, without paying.
When you hear someone like that, someone who has had such a thing, the first judgment you would think it's not ethical. But again, I would tell you, I'm trying to balance up things here. Where the money has been seen as visible, let them first enjoy as I look for more money to pay. To now come back and correct what was it actually my mistake. I was paying and the money bounced back.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Dilemma of yes, should I go back and pay twice, or if I wait for them to, contact me and tell them get it. Get it.
I think that's a real ethical dilemma. Real
Big
ethical
dilemma.
dilemma. In one sense, you're not giving a complete honest picture to the school, but of course your intention is to pay. And at the same time, like you said, you don't want to go through the hassle of explaining, I have not paid and so on and so forth. So it's
But
quite
I've
an
also
ethic.
paid.
Yeah,
I've
it's
also
quite.
paid, and the money came back for me. You get it? So that I didn't pay at all. I tried to pay, and the money came back to my account.
Yes.
So
Now that is an ethical dilemma. One, I think that the different dilemmas. Let's first of all understand, ethics is not to say I am right, you're wrong. It is to make a decision in a difficult situation. What is the best possible decision I can make in a difficult situation? Again, in either case, you can decide to use any of the lenses. But however, there are individuals who are at another level. For example, there are some people who virtue ethics, their faith is paramount. I can simply not tell a lie. I simply can't tell a lie in this situation. And the person will say, no, I will not tell. And another person will say, but I need to pay school fees. My objective is to pay school fees for my children. Make sure all of them are in school. I don't want one person to miss school just because I have delayed a little bit. So in either case, whatever the case, Nicholas, ethics is there to help you make the best possible decision. Again, I want to say ethics is not holiness. Yeah. Tom, you have a question or comment?
Doctor, I want to just hint on something you've said. You said ethics is not about right or wrong. Then there's this thing that comes to me, and I say ethics is about, is it fair or not fair?
Yes. I think you've summarized it well. Is it fair or is it not fair? Do we have any other question or comment? Do we have any other question or comment? If no, I just wanted to again point out that the second assignment is up, a group assignment. I have downloaded an article from a blog which points out the contemporary ethical dilemmas we experience as ICT professionals. So the question on Moodle, the question is, using the lenses of the ethical theories that we have so far looked at, that is utilitarianism, deontology, and and virtue ethics. Let me just look at the question again. The article just highlights the ethical issues that we're currently facing in this era, the contemporary world. Through the lenses of ethical theories so far discuss the merits and demerits of formulating codes of conduct around these issues. Make a conclusive discussion on how you as an ICT technocrat would handle the ethical dilemmas that emerge from these new technologies and situations. And this is a group presentation. Yeah. So kindly go to Moodle, check it out. And if the class reps, could you please send me the group so that I can put them in Moodle and ready for submission so that you can submit as a group. Is that okay?
So,
I mean, I respond.
Yes, Bill says it is okay. So with that,